Welcome back to another Stream Match Breakdown. I am Josh, as I tend to be, and today we have a set from the recent 2025 European International Championships held in London, England, from day 2 of that competition. And it's between two very accomplished players. On the left side, we have Taran Birdee from the United Kingdom. He's a regional champion from the 2023 season. He won Perth. And on the other side, we have Shohei Kimura from Japan, who won it all on the biggest stage in Yokohama and is your 2023 world champion. So, why this match? Because this is a 6-mon mirror. Both players are running the same 6 Pokemon. And I thought it would be a good showcase of both how to play mirrored matches, because they can be a little tricky, and just because the Pokemon are the same 6 does not mean that the teams are the same at all. The differences in move pools, in EVs, in held items, those make a huge difference, and they make an even more pronounced difference in mirror matches, as well as piloting. Piloting is always important, but you gotta be particularly on top of things in a mirror match to take advantages of the very, very slight differences between your teams. I thought that this would be a good match to examine that. And without further ado, let's move on to the teams. And for the teams here, we're going to do them both at the same time because they're so similar. Starting with the 4 Pokemon that are quote-unquote the same. They looked the same on the open team sheet, but I've seen Shohei spreads. I have pretty good guesses as to Taran's spreads, and I know that under the hood, they're very different. But as far as the open team sheet goes, they look the same. First, Miraidon. They're both running Draco Meteor and Electro Drift as single target high damage stab moves. They're both running Volt Switch as a high damage pivot move that lets you deal damage while bringing Miraidon into safety and repositioning. But Volt Switch ends up actually doing quite a lot of damage for a pivot move thanks to Miraidon having high special attack, plus the Choice Specs held item that they're both running, plus the Hadron Engine boost, plus the Electric Terrain boost. And yeah, Miraidon's ability, Hadron Engine, it sets Electric Terrain and gives a special attack boost in that Electric Terrain. And the Electric Terrain, separate from that attack boost, boosts the damage of Electric-type attacks. So it's just a lot of damage. And then for the final move, both players are running Dazzling Gleam for a powerful Fairy spread move and a good defensive Terra type. They're both Terra Fairy with Dazzling Gleam. Next, we see Farigiraf offering incredible support with its ability Armor Tail that blocks all priority moves, including Fake Out. And as a Choice Specs Pokemon, Miraidon does not love Fake Out, so there's lots of synergy there. Farigiraf has only 70 base defense, but that is augmented by its Electric Seed held item, giving it a permanent 50% defense boost until it swaps out if it's ever in Electric Terrain for any length of time. Once per bound. Farigiraf is running Psychic and Foul Play for damage, Helping Hand to boost the damage of its partner, and Trick Room to either make slow Pokemon move fast or reverse Trick Room once an opponent has set it up. And both Farigiraf are running the Water Defensive Terra type. Rounding out the Trick Room or Anti-Trick Room core, depending on how you look at it, we have Iron Hands. And these Iron Hands, like the Farigirafs, are the defensive Terra type of Terra Water. And Iron Hands on Miraidon teams is basically a second restricted because it just has so many stats balled up into one Pokemon. First of all, its base stats on their own are so unbelievably high. And then you tack on a 50% boost to its special defense from its Assault Vest held item that both players are running, and it gets a 30% boost to its attack thanks to its Quark Drive ability when Electric Terrain's up. And in this match between two Miraidon teams, Electric Terrain is probably going to be up most of the time. Both Iron Hands are running double fighting attacks of Drain Punch and Low Kick. Low Kick hits significantly harder into heavier Pokemon like most restricteds, where Drain Punch hits lighter Pokemon well and also provides Iron Hands with some nice life steal healing. Neither is running an electric move and has instead opted for Heavy Slam in order to hit light fighting resists, such as Flutter Mane and Amoonguss, for super effective high base power damage. And finally, both Iron Hands are running Fake Out, an incredible move that improves almost every team it's added to. Finally, the last Pokemon that they have completely in common is Urshifu Rapid Strike, both running Surging Strikes and Aqua Jet for lots of water damage. They are not running Close Combat or any fighting type attack, but they're going to do a lot of water type damage because they are both Terra Water, as both a defensive Terra type to remove the weaknesses of the fighting type, and to boost Urshifu's water type damage to insane levels, and they're holding the Mystic Water item to boost that damage a little bit more. Both have Haunted for Taunt to interfere with things like Amoongus's Redirection and Trick Room Setters. And finally, both Urshifu are running Detect as a defensive option to keep them safe. Now, let's look at the two Mons that are different visibly in the open team sheet, not just in the closed team sheets. First of all, we have Whimsicott, and here the differences are pretty stark. They do have the same move pools. They're running Moonblast for damage, Tailwind for speed control, Light Screen in order to reduce the damage of powerful special attackers like Miraidon and Calyrex Shadow Rider, and finally Encore to lock opponents into moves that they'd rather not use too many times in a row. However, they have different items and different Terra types, and those facts are related. Taran has gone for the Covert Cloak Held item. That makes Taran's Whimsicott immune to the secondary effects of moves, most notably the flinch effect of Fake Out, making Whimsicott very good at shutting things down with Encore, getting up its screens, or setting Tailwind, whether the opponent wants it to or not. Whimsicott is running the Dark Terra type, which removes its weaknesses and also makes it immune to Prankster moves from opposing Pokemon, such as the Encore from the Whimsicott on the other side of the field. And resisting Calyrex Shadow's stab attacks is very nice as well. Shohei, on the other hand, is running the Focus Sash held item, which guarantees Whimsicott can survive a hit. If you would knock it out in one hit, Whimsicott will survive on 1 HP. And that's very powerful, but is especially powerful on a Prankster Pokemon, because you can play risky with it and delay setting Tailwind until the last second, and if your opponent brings you down to Focus Sash, well, thanks to Prankster, you're probably moving at the start of the next turn, so you can just set Tailwind at the end of that, or click Encore, or do whatever you need. And it's oftentimes that, you understand that your opponent can double up into Whimsicott and knock it out in one turn, but then they're leaving your other Pokemon completely unchecked, and you can often force these pins where your opponent can't afford to leave your other Pokemon completely unchecked, but they also need to double up Whimsicott, which is just good math for the Focus Sash Whimsicott player. However, Fake Out is a big problem for Focus Sash Whimsicott. So, Shohei is running the Ghost Terra type, which gives it total immunity to normal type moves like Fake Out, but at the cost of its Terrestrialization. And the final Pokemon, which has differences between their open team sheets, is Ogerpon Hearthflame. Both are running Ivy Cudgel for strong fire type damage, both are running Follow Me to redirect, and both are running Spiky Shield to keep their Ogerpon safe. However, Shohei is running Focus Energy, presumably to deal with Intimidate Cycle teams featuring Incineroar, and Taran is running Wood Hammer to deal large grass damage. I don't expect the difference between the Ogerpons to come up though during this match because, well, there's no Intimidate, and also the only water type is Urshifu, though maybe we'll see Wood Hammer come up because it does hit harder than Ivy Cudgel when Ogerpon has not terrestrialized. But why would hitting Urshifu not matter that much? Because something that I'm sure both players know going into this is that the standard Pokemon brought to the Miraidon Mirror are Miraidon, Iron Hands, Ogerpon, and then either Whimsicott or Farigiraf. You generally leave your water type at home when facing the strongest electric type Pokemon ever created, which makes a little bit of sense when you think about it. And something to note here is that the reason for those four is Miraidon because it's your main damage dealer, Whimsicott or Farigiraf for speed control, Iron Hands because it has 10 billion stat points, especially in electric terrain, and Ogerpon because, well, it's good, but also because the typing of Fire and Grass is exceptionally good into Miraidon, as it resists both Electric and Fairy without having to Terrestrialize. yeah, now you all know the teams in terms of the open team sheets, and I'm excited to discover the differences in the closed team sheets and mostly how they interact with each other and how these players pilot these similar yet different teams at the absolute highest level. And here we are at the start of Game 1. We see an Iron Hands Miraidon lead from both players, actually, and let's pay close attention to the ability activation order. Miraidon's Hadron Engine activates on Taran's side. Then on Shohei's side, Iron Hands activates its Quark Drive. Then on Taran's side, Iron Hands activates its Quark Drive. And what does that order tell us? First off, Taran's Miraidon is not slower than Shohei's Miraidon. They're either speed tied or Taran has the faster Miraidon because Taran's Miraidon is the one that got to activate its Quark Drive at the beginning of the battle and set electric terrain. Similarly, Shohei's Iron Hands is not slower than Taran's Iron Hands. Shohei's Iron Hands is either faster or speed tied. And that's very important considering both of these Iron Hands are fake out primed, but only Shohei has the option to fake out Taran's Iron Hands unless they're speed tied and Taran wins the speed tie. Because if Shohei goes for a fake out into Taran's Iron Hands, well then Taran's Iron Hands doesn't get to move and both Miraidons get to attack. But if Shohei goes for a fake out into Taran's Miraidon, then Taran gets to fake out into Shohei's Miraidon, and they're both stunned for a turn. We'll end up with that same board state on turn 2, except Iron Hands won't have their fake outs available, and both Miraidons will have taken slight chip damage. However, Taran cannot fake out Shohei's Iron Hands, unless it's a speed tie and Taran wins the speed tie, which would be a huge risk on Game 1 of such a high stakes set. Because Shohei could just fake out Taran's Miraidon first, and then effectively Taran gets no turns, and Shohei's Miraidon gets 1 turn, which would just be a huge tempo loss. So there's 2 sort of main dynamics at play here. If we're to look at just the Miraidons, if they were to attack this turn, or if they are to attack next turn, depending on how the fake out wars play out, Taran moves first and has to call what Shohei is going to do. Taran can either Electro Drift or Draco Meteor or even Dazzling Gleam, but that's not going to pick up the knockout, depending on if he thinks that Shohei's Miraidon is going to go for Terra Fairy or not. And if Taran gets that right, he probably just wins the game. And if he gets it wrong, he probably just loses the game, though Shohei has to make the same call and get it right as well. It's not so simple as a 50-50 guessing game on both sides, because if Taran does not terrestrialize on turn 1 and Shohei fakes out Taran's Miraidon, then neither Miraidon's going to move, but now it's only a 50-50 one-way, because Shohei knows that Taran has already terrestrialized. Whereas if Taran does not terrestrialize, then Taran will have that option for the next turn to mix it up with either a Terra or a non-Terra. But Shohei also knows that and knows it's less likely for Taran to terrestrialize on this turn. So they both have to make calls here, as is sort of a hallmark of the Miraidon mirror. Also, Taran has an option that Shohei does not. Taran could just Volt Switch out of there. And that's sort of a soft call on Shohei's Miraidon going Terra Fairy, because it would do massive amount of damage. And even if Shohei didn't terrestrialize, that would let Taran's Miraidon get out of there and let Taran bring in something else to take the hit from Shohei's Miraidon. So that's the safe play, but sometimes safe is something your opponent can take advantage of in a matchup like this. We're getting one play really right will probably decide the game. So let's see how each player decides to handle this. And to be clear, the reason why I said that, I framed it in a way of Shohei having a little bit more control and Taran being the one who reacts. It's just because Shohei's Iron Hand has been shown to either be speed tied or faster, giving him the control on whether Miraidons get to attack, giving Shohei the control on whether the Miraidons get to attack on turn 1 or turn 2. Start of turn 1. Taran goes for the Terra Fairy on Miraidon. So this is calling that Shohei is going to fake out into Taran's Iron Hands. And Shohei goes for the fake out into Taran's Miraidon, and Taran looks visibly upset on camera. He's scratching the back of his head. Taran responds with the fake out into Shohei's Miraidon. Both Miraidons flinch and do not move. So now we're at that same board state that we were at the start of turn 1, except both Miraidons have taken a little bit of chip damage from a Electric Terrain boosted, Quark Drive boosted fake out. But more importantly, Taran has already terrestrialized. So Shohei is safe to go for electric damage into that spot, and Taran either has to Volt Switch out or make a call here. And of course, the Iron Hands can do damage to hit the Miraidons or whatever they swap into either way. Start of turn 2, Taran goes for the Volt Switch into Shohei's Miraidon. It is Taran is now staring at the camera, seemingly unhappy with the fact that Shohei's Miraidon did not terrestrialize. So Shohei got that call very right. Taran gets to swap out now, bringing his own Miraidon to safely, and swaps into his Ogerpon Hearthflame to replace the Miraidon. As Shohei's Miraidon also goes for a Volt Switch into that slot, doing it just under half to Taran's Ogerpon Hearthflame. Very valuable chip damage. As Shohei swaps into the Whimsicott. Shohei's Iron Hands goes for Heavy Slam into Taran's Ogerpon Hearthflame, as Taran's Iron Hands goes for Heavy Slam into Shohei's Whimsicott. And let's talk about that for a sec. Why did they both Heavy Slam the opposing Miraidon? Because they both figured that unless something went like... Taran went with the play that always lets Taran swap out. And Shohei figured that if he got the play right, he'd be able to swap out and swap something else in. What is the scariest thing that could swap in from Miraidon? It's Whimsicott. So they Heavy Slam to cover for that. Shohei does swap into Whimsicott, and he can. Why? Because his Whimsicott has the Focus Sash. It is brought down to Focus Sash and survives on 1 HP, and now it can still set Tailwind after that first turn. Because, the Focus Sash, which Taran's Whimsicott does not have, lets it survive a hit, and then use Prankster to move first and set Tailwind on the next turn. Taran, however, does not have that option. Taran has to swap into Ogerpon Hearthflame, or risk that Shohei goes for Heavy Slam and knocks out Whimsicott in one hit. And it's a good thing for Taran that he did swap into Hearthflame, because the Heavy Slam would have knocked out the Covert Cloak Whimsicott in one hit. But is it really? Because now Shohei has Whimsicott on the field, which is the stronger Mon out of the two. And that means that Shohei can get Tailwind up early. That being said, Whimsicott can't do too much that'll affect the board state right now, so this actually isn't too rough for Taran. I can set Tailwind, but Taran has a Whimsicott in the back, which we saw earlier when he was choosing which Pokemon to swap to, that could come in later and match that Tailwind. And right now, Whimsicott is pretty massively threatened by Ogerpon taking a knockout on it. But Shohei's Whimsicott could set Tailwind, let itself go down, get the maximum number of turns of Tailwind with Miraidon swapped in, and take either do a ton of damage to Iron Hands, bringing both of Taran's Pokemon very low because Ogerpon took so much from the Volt Switch Heavy Slam double up, or taking out Ogerpon and taking a valuable knockout of the only Fairy resist on Taran's team. No, not that Ogerpon can resist Fairy very well right now, because it's only at 40 HP. Ogerpon uses Follow Me on Taran's side at the start of turn 3, as Shohei's Whimsicott does indeed set Tailwind, probably expecting to go down this turn. Shohei goes for a low kick into Taran's Ogerpon Hearthflame, which knocks it out. And Taran's Iron Hands goes for a low kick into Shohei's Iron Hands, bringing it down to just under half HP in the electric terrain. And Taran brings in Miraidon to replace... Yeah, and Taran brings in Miraidon to replace the Ogerpon Hearthflame that went down. Okay, so what situation do we find ourselves in here? Shohei has Tailwind up, but only 3 turns are remaining on that. Even if Whimsicott is still alive, it's tough but not impossible to swap it out, let something take a hit, swap it back in, and set up another Tailwind. That means Taran's going to get the later Tailwind, and so the turns where Shohei's Tailwind is up that Taran's are not are right now, and the turns that Taran will have Tailwind up when Shohei does not will come later. However, Shohei has an Iron Hands and a 1 HP Whimsicott on the field. He's not super well positioned to take advantage of the fact, whereas Taran has a Miraidon on the field and ready to rumble thanks to the free swap in when Ogerpon Hearthflame went down. Though Shohei has another Pokemon in the back, likely the Ogerpon Hearthflame. Why did Taran low kick the Shohei's Iron Hands instead of the Whimsicott? The reason to do that is that you generally don't want to knock out a Whimsicott on the turn that it sets Tailwind, because that gives your opponent a chance to swap in and have 3 full turns of Tailwind with their biggest damage dealer, in this case, Miraidon. The cost is leaving Whimsicott alive means it gets to do more Whimsicott things. And what is best is on a case-by-case basis. For example, at the very start of the game, it's often more valuable to just burst down Whimsicott, get it over with, and figure out that Tailwind will be gone by the end game. But in this sort of mid-game situation, you really don't want to give that free swap. You also don't want to leave it alive, but Taran's weighed the cost and benefits of each, and clearly decided in this case that he simply cannot afford to knock out Whimsicott at this point in time. Alright, Taran opens the turn by swapping out Iron Hands for his own Whimsicott, the Covert Cloak Whimsicott, as Shohei's Whimsicott sets up Light Screen, which will massively mitigate the damage output from Taran's Miraidon. Speaking of, Taran's Miraidon goes for a Terra Fairy Dazzling Gleam, knocking out both the Whimsicott and Shohei's Iron Hands, meaning that that Shohei's Iron Hands never gets to attack. And now we find quite the interesting position, because what advantages does each side have over the other? Taran has one more Pokemon. Taran has Miraidon, Iron Hands, and Whimsicott. All are relatively healthy. Shohei has only Miraidon, which is at, I think, about half HP after the Volt Switch and the Fake Out. And this last Pokemon, presumably the Ogerpon Hearthflame, which resists Fairy. And that's very important, because one huge bit of information that Shohei has is that Taran's Miraidon is locked into the Fairy-type Dazzling Gleam, meaning there is no way for Taran's Miraidon Whimsicott combo to do good damage to Shohei's Fire-type Ogerpon Hearthflame this turn. Also, it means that Shohei can go for a relatively safe Terra Fairy on his own Miraidon and not be weak to Dazzling Gleam, and he also knows that Taran's Whimsicott has to go for a Tailwind this turn if Taran wants his Miraidon to attack first, because Shohei already has Tailwind up. So let's see how each player takes advantage of that fact. And we see the Terastallization coming out on Shohei's side. And yes, it's into Shohei's Miraidon to survive the Terra Fairy Dazzling Gleam if Taran decides to go for Tailwind Dazzling Gleam. And next we'll see Taran's Whimsicott lock in the Tailwind, speeding up Taran's Miraidon to be the fastest thing on the field, and Taran's Miraidon indeed goes for Dazzling Gleam. A crit here could be huge. Oh, and it does crit. It knocks out Shohei's Tera Fairy Miraidon with a critical hit. Dazzling Gleam. Like I'd watched this match like right after EUIC, and I had totally forgotten that happened. Wow, that is so huge. Shohei goes for the Ivy Cudgel into Taran's Miraidon. Since it's Tera Fairy, it does good damage, bringing Miraidon down to just a sliver of HP, but this is still not a great position for Shohei by any means, because Shohei's Miraidon not attacked. And Shohei is a very, how do I put this? He's very passionate on the camera. He tends to react visibly to moves, and you could see him there acting all frustrated about the critical hit, because that was such a huge critical hit. And that's something else that's a little bit of a downside with your matches. Oftentimes, because the teams are so closely matched, even with their EV spread differences and different piloting differences, a little bit of RNG, like a critical hit in one way or the other, can have a really big impact. We saw an encore from Taran's Whimsicott onto Shohei's Ogerpon Hearthflame, as the Ogerpon Hearthflame took out Taran's Miraidon, and then we see Iron Hands come in, and we're just seeing a rapid over multiple turns, a fake out Moonblast Barrage, and then a Drain Punch to finish off Shohei's Ogerpon Hearthflame and clean up the set. The encore, in case you're wondering, was to prevent Spiky Shield shenanigans, but Spiky Shield also would have been a little unwise, considering that if Whimsicott was left alive, it could encore the Ogerpon Hearthflame into Spiky Shield. But also, Taran doesn't want to take any risks, and once the critical hit let him pick up the knockout on Shohei's Miraidon, he realized that Encore was just one of the cleanest ways to lock up the game and allow Iron Hands to clean up as cleanly as possible. Alright, let's move on to Game 2, and we see from Shohei, the Miraidon Iron Hands leads. But from Taran, we see just Whimsicott and Ogerpon Hearthflame. And by the way, from what I saw last game, the speed tiers, in terms of when the abilities activated, remain consistent with like when the Iron Hands attacked relative to each other. So either they're both getting really lucky on speed ties, or more likely they are not speed tied at all. This time Taran leads Ogerpon and Whimsicott, which is a little scary because this Whimsicott is somewhat undefended. And I would say that this lead definitely gives Shohei the upper hand, just because he has two massive damage threats on the field that can start hitting things right now. But Taran can get the Tailwind up early. And yes, we see on turn 1, Taran's Whimsicott goes for Tailwind, and Ogerpon goes for Ivy Cudgel into the Iron Hands, dealing about a third. Shohei's Miraidon goes for a Dazzling Gleam, doing just over half to the Whimsicott and chip damage to the Fire-type Ogerpon. And Iron Hands goes for a Drain Punch into the Whimsicott, bringing it down to only 14 HP. So there, Taran got the Tailwind up, and Shohei actually, this is probably a pretty ideal situation, bring the Whimsicott low without giving it the free swap out at the end of turn 1 to give maximum Tailwind turns to Taran's Miraidon. I'm pretty sure Taran wanted the Whimsicott to die to a Heavy Slam there, but Shohei knew about that and made sure to bring it low without knocking it out. Turn 2, we see Taran Terrastalize into a Terrafire Ogerpon, getting the Embody Aspect attack boost and effectively doubling the damage of Ivy Cudgel. Why? Well, Taran had this passive lead, and it seems like he was sort of relying on Shohei knocking out his Whimsicott, and so but now he can't afford to be passive, so he has to spend his Terrastalization to make sure he has some sort of damage threat on the field. Taran goes for a Moonblast and an Ivy Cudgel into Shohei's Miraidon, which survives on very low red HP, and Taran is reacting visibly frustrated to that, with his head in his hands. He's Yeah, he is emoting negative emotions as Shohei goes for the Dazzling Gleam, knocking out Whimsicott and doing a good chunk to Taran's Ogerpon as Shohei's Iron Hands goes for the Drain Punch, knocking out Taran's Ogerpon. That reaction there makes me assume that Taran thought there was a good shot that the super effective Moonblast plus the Terrafire Ivy Cudgel would be enough damage to knock out Shohei's Miraidon, because Shohei's Miraidon survived on very low HP. But also, we've seen Shohei's Miraidon that's moving slower than Taran's Miraidon, so it's likely that Shohei's Miraidon is significantly bulkier than your average Miraidon. So Taran probably was genuinely surprised to see the calcs hash out that way. And little bit of insider information, I have seen Shohei spreads, and that is a max HP Miraidon, so that's why it was able to take the hit. Taran brings out Miraidon and Iron Hands in Tailwind, and we see Shohei swap out his own Iron Hands into Whimsicott. Taran's Miraidon goes for a Dazzling Gleam, knocking out Shohei's Miraidon and breaking the Focus Sash on Shohei's Whimsicott, as Taran's Iron Hands goes for a Low Kick, doing negligible damage to the very light Fairy-type Whimsicott on Shohei's side. So this gives Shohei the opportunity to set up Tailwind pretty much for free. Yes, this was a play that Taran could have called, but it would have involved going for a Heavy Slam into an Iron Hands, which is something most players will not choose to do, so it was relatively safe. And now Shohei brings out the Ogerpon Hearthflame, and Shohei once again knows that Taran's Miraidon is locked into Dazzling Gleam, meaning this Ogerpon Hearthflame is now in an extremely dominant position for Shohei to output massive amounts of fire damage, while effectively ignoring the Dazzling Gleams coming from Taran's side. And the Dazzling Gleams aren't hitting too hard. Yes, it's a Miraidon, but it's a non-stab move, and Taran cannot Terrastalize because he already Terrastalized his Ogerpon. Shohei goes for a Spiky Shield on his Ogerpon and sets up Light Screen with the Whimsicott. I like that play a lot. The intuitive thing to do is set up Tailwind, but Shohei looks at this situation and realizes, well, what's Tailwind really doing for me? I have the Iron Hands, that's probably faster at this point. Tailwind's about to expire, and I don't really need my Ogerpon Hearthflame to outspeed the Miraidon, and Ogerpon already outspeeds Taran's Taran's Iron Hands. So Light Screen to just make Iron Hands and Ogerpon Hearthflame these super tanks seems to make a lot of sense. But at the start of the next turn, Shohei does set Tailwind, which, if your Whimsicott's still alive, you might as well, because otherwise it's just going to go to down to a Dazzling Gleam without doing anything. There is no more Tailwind on Taran's side, so because it expired last turn, so we see Shohei's Ogerpon go for an Ivy Cudgel that does a good chunk of damage into Taran's Iron Hands. We see the Dazzling Gleam come out from Taran's Miraidon, knocking out the Whimsicott on Shohei's side, and doing some light chip to Shohei's Ogerpon. So now the board state is Iron Hands just swapped in on Shohei's side to replace the Whimsicott that went down. Shohei has a Light Screen and a Tailwind up. Taran has neither. There is no more Electric Terrain because it expired at the end of the last turn. We have the 92% HP Iron Hands on Shohei's side, and the 30% HP Ogerpon also on Shohei's side against the 75% HP Iron Hands and the full HP Miraidon on Taran's side. The Miraidon is locked into Dazzling Gleam, and on Shohei's side, the Iron Hands knows Fake Out. It can use Fake Out because it just came onto the field, and neither of Taran's Pokemon can protect, giving Shohei a huge edge, especially because Shohei has not Terrastalized yet. So I think that this Ogerpon now has the chance to go ham, or this Iron Hands can Terrastalize to become a super tank by shedding its Fairy-type weakness. And we see the Terrastalization on Shohei's Iron Hands to Terra Water, which is safe in front of Miraidon and Iron Hands because one's locked into Dazzling Gleam and the other one does not have an electric type attack. We see Ivy Cudgel come out, dealing good damage to Terran's Iron Hands, about half of its remaining HP. Terran's Miraidon goes for a Dazzling Gleam, doing chip damage to negligible damage through the light screen with no electric terrain to both of Shohei's Pokemon. And Shohei's Iron Hands, which is definitely seeming to be faster now, goes for the low kick into Terran's Iron Hands, finishing it off even without electric terrain. It is now just Terran's Miraidon locked into Dazzling Gleam against these two super tanks with light screen up, and Terran has his head in his hands, but this time it seems not with frustration for a play going wrong, but rather he's studying Shohei's team sheet, and Shohei's doing the same. They're both taking their time and making their game plans for Game 3, because at this point, it's clear that Shohei is going to win Game 2. It is clear they are going to Game 3, and both player wants to take every moment they can to make sure they are as prepared for that Game 3 as possible. Shohei's Ogerpon hits Miraidon with the Ivy Cudgel. Miraidon Dazzling Gleams again for chip, and we see another Drain Punch from Shohei's Iron Hands. Josh, just skip the time in between turns. Ivy Cudgel moves first and knocks out the Miraidon. Oh yeah, Tailwind was up. So, yes, 1-2-1. We are going to Game 3. All right, here we are at the start of Game 3, and we are seeing the same leads as Game 1 with the Miraidon Iron Hands on both sides. And we see the exact same ability activation order, once again sort of adding a little more confirmation to the idea that there are not speed ties on this field right now. So let's see how each player decides to mix it up or go for the same play expecting the opponent to mix it up. Turn 1 starts with a Terastallization on Miraidon to Terra Fairy, and this is on whose side? This is on Terran's side, as Shohei's Iron Hands goes for the Fake Out, and we see Terran shake his head. Terran's Iron Hands fakes out Shohei's Miraidon, and so we just saw the exact same turn 1 as Game 1 play out on turn 1 of Game 3. Last time we were in this position, we saw Volt Switches from both Miraidons into the opposing Miraidon slot, and Heavy Slams into the same slots to cover for Whimsicott switch-ins. We've already been over the nuance of that, so let's just see what these players lock into in this exact same situation being played out a second time. And we see a Terastallization from Shohei's side. And as his Miraidon goes to Terra Fairy, and Terran looks upset. He's shaking his head. He's rolling it back against the chair. Head in his hands. He's now grabbing his own shoulder. And yes, Terran's Miraidon goes for the Dazzling Gleam, dealing a ton of damage to both of Shohei's Pokemon, but not knocking them out. As Shohei also responds with the Dazzling Gleam, dealing a ton of damage to both of Terran's Pokemon, but not knocking them out. All Pokemon are now at very low HP now. Shohei's Iron Hands goes for the Drain Punch into Terran's Miraidon, getting the knockout. Yes, and Terran's Miraidon faints. And let's see what Terran's Iron Hands goes for. It also goes for a Drain Punch into Shohei's Miraidon, but it was not a Heavy Slam. It was a Drain Punch, and Shohei's Miraidon survives the exact same double up that Terran's Miraidon went down to. That is so huge. Now Shohei has a Miraidon that is very likely the fastest thing on the field. And even though it's just at 1 HP, that Iron Hands is super low too, and this Dazzling Gleam is going off first, and Terran can do absolutely nothing about it. Something is going to have to take that damage. Here we see that, yes, Shohei had sort of the downside in the mind games between the two Miraidons due to having the slower Miraidon, but the faster Iron Hands gave Shohei an edge to cancel that out. And the reward for being the slower Miraidon, having the bulk on the Miraidon, looks like it plays a huge role and let Shohei's Miraidon survive a little longer than Terran's would have been able to. Shohei starts the turn by swapping out Miraidon into Whimsicott, as Taran also swaps out Iron Hands into Whimsicott. There's a Taran swapped in Fire Pond to replace the Miraidon. Shohei goes for a Dazzling Gleam, doing about 80% to Whimsicott and chip damage to Taran's Ogerpon, as Taran's Ogerpon goes for an Ivy Cudgel, but the Whimsicott was safe to swap in because of its Focus Sash. It survives on just 1 HP, and now we have a 1 HP Whimsicott and under 10% HP Miraidon on Shohei's side, but they can do so much, and there is little that Taran can do about it. Shohei goes for the Tailwind as Taran's Whimsicott sets a light screen, as Taran's Miraidon hits Dazzling Gleam, knocking out the Whimsicott on Taran's side and doing some more chip damage to Taran's Ogerpon. It is now at just below half HP, like 45 to 50%. Taran's Ogerpon responds with an Ivy Cudgel, knocking out Shohei's Miraidon, but the damage is done. Wow. Yeah. We see Shohei swap in the Ogerpon Hearthflame, replacing the Miraidon that went down. And we see Taran bring out the Iron Hands, which is the only thing he has in the back. So now Tailwind's up, and Fake Out is on Taran's side of the field, but all Shohei has to do is Spiky Shield once, and suddenly he is super duper back in the driver's seat. And yes, I mean, he was already in the driver's seat, but he can maintain his lead. And yes, Shohei goes for a Spiky Shield as Taran fakes out the Whimsicott on Shohei's side, which I think Shohei is absolutely fine with. He wants that free swap into Iron Hands. Taran's Ogerpon goes for the Ivy Cudgel into Shohei's Ogerpon as the electricity disappears from the battlefield, meaning no more Quark Drive for these Iron Hands. And now, we see that lead from the Miraidon surviving coming to head as we find ourselves in a situation where both sides have an Ogerpon Hearthflame and an Iron Hands, but and both of the Ogerpons are very damaged at below half HP. But Shohei was able to convert that Miraidon surviving into two major advantages. One being that his Iron Hands is still at full HP, and second, that his Iron Hands still has Fake Out. And since Taran's Iron Hands cannot protect, Fake Out is exactly what Shohei needs, because he could just lock down Taran's Ogerpon with a Fake Out. Oh no, Shohei's going for the Fake Out into Taran's Iron Hands, freezing it in place, and goes for the Ivy Cudgel into Taran's Iron Hands, knocking it out. Looks like he wanted a little bit more damage from the Fake Out just to make sure that the knockout went through. Taran's Ogerpon goes for the Ivy Cudgel into Shohei's Iron Hands, knocking it out. And now we have the... Sorry, when I said earlier the HP numbers, I meant Shohei as the max HP Ogerpon, and Shohei's Iron Hands is damaged. So Shohei's Ogerpon goes for the Ivy Cudgel. It is a full HP Ogerpon and hits Taran's low HP Ogerpon, knocking it out, and Shohei Kimura wins the set. All right, wow. That's all I've got for y'all. It's a very nuanced game of back and forth, and I know there's stuff I missed or decided not to mention, but I think I covered most of the nuances there pretty well. But as always, if you disagree, have any comments, have any plays you liked, let me know. I love that sort of feedback, and I appreciate that sort of interaction. One big project we have upcoming on this channel is a VGC Nuzlocke, primarily piloted by Abby. So check out the Prankster Spore YouTube channel in future weeks for more info on that. And of course, we'll have more match breakdowns coming in the future. If you stuck with this one for so long, thank you for watching. I know that this was a slower, more technical analysis because there were a lot more factors at play, and a lot of the situations had a lot of ways they could play out. Some of my friends described Miraidon as the 50-50 way to play the game. And while I don't think that calling it 50-50s is entirely accurate, the fact of the matter is there's a lot of ways that any given turn can go when a Miraidon is on the field compared to with other restricteds. So there was a lot to cover, and I appreciate you sticking with. Until next time, goodbye.